Welcome back, everybody. George here with Kilohearts, and today I'm interviewing ill-esha. It's great to see you, ill-esha. How are you doing?
I'm so good. It's great to be here.
Wonderful to have you. Yeah, we're going to talk about everything in your career, your future hopes and your past glories. I hope we're going to find some really good stuff to discuss. So why don't we start right at the beginning? Tell me the backstory. Where did you start from musically? What's your career history?
Well, I actually come from a family of musicians, although mostly on the classical and jazz side. So I was pretty much encouraged my whole life to do music, played in bands, took piano lessons, blah, blah, blah. Got to the point where I discovered raves and DJing, and I was just smitten by electronic music and the ability to create any sound that I want. And so since then, I've been just getting deeper and deeper into hacking my live performance with things like custom controllers, doing sound design and making patches, and actually teaching sound design as well. So it's been a rabbit hole for me indeed.
And I understand you've been through various different genre incarnations, if I could put it that way. How does that work for you? Do you try something out until you get tired of it, or what's the deal?
You know, I've just never liked boundaries. I started out in the scene as drum and bass, MC, DJ, and producer because I loved the sort of combinations that I heard in it, jazz, metal, funk, rock. And as I got more and more into the scene, I noticed that people like to put themselves in these little boxes. And for me, I'm almost incapable of doing it. And it's weird, you know, because I do a lot of music for licensing as well now. And for some reason, when there is a directive, I can make something to spec. But if you put me in a studio and tell me to go, it's pretty hard for me to even stick within a certain genre. So for me, it just becomes sounds and music that I hear in my head. And it's just been really crazy, I guess. But my whole life, I've always heard little melodies, and that's how they come out. And so whatever tempo and genre they end up being is how it goes.
Yeah, and that's actually a very free way to be. I think if you're trying to follow a particular popular niche, you're never going to be making music that's truly you. You might be more successful that way, I guess, but it's not what a lot of people want to do. They want to just make their stuff and hope that that's really successful.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it makes it really hard as an artist when you're trying to tour. They want press releases. They want to know which artist they can put you with. And my thing has always just been really enjoying being everywhere. You know, one of the things I love to do most at a festival is play an afternoon set and play a nighttime set and just have them represent totally different sides of my artistic personality.
Absolutely. So there was drum and bass, and what was the next big thing for you after that?
Well, around 2008, I fell in love with the early stages of what was then being called glitch hop. These days, I think that encompasses a little bit of a broader umbrella, but at the time, it was just sort of left field, glitchy, hip hop kind of West Coast music coming out. Artists like the Glitch Mob were super inspirational. And when I discovered that, it was like the freedom that I'd been wanting from drum and bass, and moved into that early dubstep. And from there, I think actually the entire scene has evolved to mash it all up together and call it bass music. And that's sort of been my love. But you know, the more experienced I get as a producer, the more I keep opening myself up to even more genres and flavors and influences as I travel the world and experience life.
Absolutely. I'm always so curious how these genres get defined, how these labels come to be applied to things, because there's no one committee that does it. So just for you personally, how do you understand the divisions between these different types of music?
These days, it's definitely challenging. I feel like the scene kind of divides itself into two major camps: the four on the floor and the bass. You know, and for the four on the floor, people having the kick on every beat is the most important, and for the bass, people having a high level of sub frequencies is most important, despite the tempo. So these days, I think that's what it was. In the old days, there were maybe only 8 to 10 major genres, and they were very narrowly defined. You know, you had house and trance, techno, drum and bass. Now we've just had so many post this and fusion that I truly think that the cool thing about it is you can be a little more diverse. You can change tempos during a set. I remember when people used to complain in the days of vinyl DJing if somebody would jump tempos too many times, and now it seems to be standard.
And do you consider yourself very firmly in the bass camp, if there is a division into those two camps, or are you straddling both sides?
I'm straddling so many sides because I also love to write, pop. I do a lot of like R&B and hip hop side projects as well. So I used to be a lot more in camp bass, but like I said, the more into production I get, the more inspired I get by just doing new things. So I've even been exploring things that I hadn't done a lot of, such as house, funk, disco, things like that, just to try something and just to get super inspired. I mean, as a sound designer as well, you don't want to be confined to making particular types of sounds just because you're making only this genre, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Let's talk about sound design a little bit. Do you have a particular um, a voice or a style, would you say, in the sounds that you design? Is there a particular flavor that you steer towards or away from?
Absolutely. I think very warm, deep. I would say if I am an element, what's your sound design personality? I would be water because I really like to make, and this does come from drum and bass influence. This comes from my life, but deep sonic landscapes. There's a lot of mid-range stuff that's super hyper and popular in the US right now, and that stuff has never been as much my thing as sort of deep notch filtering, lots of sub balance, lots of long pads, deep in reverb. So like I said, water is kind of a good word, I think, to describe my personality. I also really love to use organic sources, so whether it's Foley or whether it's my own voice. And I think one of the things that I've become known for is making vocal wavetables and synth presets using vocal sound sources.
And what do you look for in the tools that you use? Obviously, we're here as Kilohearts to talk about our stuff, but you don't have to. What do you look for when you find a soft synth or a piece of hardware? What are you inspired by?
Well, the more that I learn, the more I just love esoteric math concepts. Like I think that the nerd level goes up, and now I'm going, ooh, like shepherd tones and random noise generators. And so these days I'm kind of looking for people who take concepts like that and make them more user friendly. So if there's a plugin with an easy to use interface that still incorporates some really cool new techniques of randomization or ways that I haven't thought about synths before, that's like a good match for me, because I am also an artist. I love to just jump in and flow with a plugin, a piece of software. But if it's really unintuitive to navigate, I may move on to something else. At the same time, I don't want to be limited to simplistic concepts just because I want a pretty GUI. So it's a bit of a balance. I mean, I really look for stuff that is intuitive and also does next level things just to give my textures a level up.
I don't know if it's just me, but I've always felt like there's a really strong divide between the artist portion of my work and the engineer portion or the tech side. Is that the case for you also? Do you feel that they fight one another, or do they naturally coexist for you?
No, it's very interesting too, because right now I'm teaching at a university and you have people coming in from both sides of the equation, computer programmers and musicians. And yeah, I mean, I would say originally from the musician cave, but I also have been very early technically interested, and I still do notice that they fight in me. I think that's one of the reasons I started teaching and being in these environments, is to try and connect those sides of people's brains, because you could explain it as right brain, left brain, creative and logical. And I think that for me, what really fights is the artist's impulse to just go, flow, jam, keep going, and then the engineer's impulse to fix it, tune it, and tweak it. So this actually manifests a lot when I'm collaborating with other people. I actually have collaborated with two people in the last 2 weeks, one of who is very much from the artist side and one is from the engineer side. And with the artist, we just jumped in and started jamming. The mix is probably horrible, but we've got like 12 or 13 ideas now from our sessions that are flowing that we are going to build outward from. And that's just how the process works for that starting point. For the engineer, it was like working on 2 bars for hours and hours and hours, and those 2 bars are pristine and perfect. But if I tried to move on beyond those 2 bars with this person before making sure everything was in its right place, there was hell to pay. So I think that myself, yeah, I start writing and I flow, and sometimes that engineer in me will go back and go, no, 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 you have to fix the kick drum before going on. And sometimes that can actually really put a damper on creativity. So I do still have a bias towards flowing, especially with musical ideas. But I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with also being super technical and letting the exploration of perfection find you these beautiful moments to compose from. Like, that is also something that, like I said, as I get more experienced and try new things, I try to use more super technical tools like that to break away from my patterns. So, long answer, but I would say continuously challenging yourself to use both sides and break patterns is probably the most valuable thing you can do as a producer and artist.
Yeah, it's a terrific answer. And something in it struck me. Collaboration is a thing that strikes me as a kind of a way forward from either of those extremes. If you're struggling to be more technical or struggling to be more artistic, going and finding someone who's different than you is a way to move forward. Do you enjoy collaborating? Do you find it something that you naturally do?
I absolutely love collaborating. It is just, I mean, it's kind of my reason. Like, and when I'm socializing, my ideal day is to hang out with friends who are into music and jam out and create together. One of the things I'm really interested in, of course, is the history of music and tribalism and how we evolved as humans and used music to communicate. And one of the things I've realized is, yeah, we used to tell stories and songs, and I think that that's just a really valuable perspective to keep in mind.
What is your musical tribe, if you have one?
Gosh, storytellers. I think the collaborators are a tribe in ourselves, because we love that process of navigating something that's not yours or the other person's. So I guess my tribe is the connectors, the community minders, and it's that's also why I think my genres, my styles have kept expanding. The more people I work with, the more techniques and styles I'm inspired by, the more my own style just evolves.
That's wonderful. And are you working with anybody right now that you can talk about, or someone recently that you would like to discuss at all? Or is it all
Absolutely.
secret?
I have done such a wild variety of things, and I think that is a blessing of being multi-genre, is continuously, when people know that about you, they won't be afraid to approach you from totally different worlds. So coming up, I just done a really cool couple weeks with a producer named Sofa Sound, making some funky house and disco. As always, I work with one of my main collaborators, Frost, and that's more on the bass side. And I've been doing a lot of exciting new projects with Matt Black of Cold Cut, Ninja Tune founder. We've been doing some sounds for his app Jam Pro. We've also been working on some songs, and I'll be doing some ambient stuff for an upcoming Ninja Tune compilation that I've been doing with him. So a lot of stuff in the pipeline, and actually upcoming for the Berkeley commencement concert, I have done a remix of Gilberto Gil, the Brazilian guitarist, and collaborated with a bunch of students and faculty on that. So yes, I am always collaborating. And in fact, this year I'm going to be moving towards new identities for my own solo artist project. But ill-esha for me has moved to symbolize exactly that: a collaborator, a communicator, an educator. And so that's always going to be the name I use for all these collaborations and for all these community projects.
I'm really interested to know how you balance the different aspects of your career. You have teaching, you have kind of technical and commercial work, and then you have your purely artistic side, if you like. Do you see them as separate, and do you find it easy to amalgamate them?
Gosh, it's really, I think, time is the center force of how we can get any of this done. And I've just learned to constantly be on my feet, using every single moment. You know, if I'm waiting for people to connect on a Zoom call, I might be organizing a file over here. If I need to sit in a lineup somewhere, I might be doing something else. And so I think that just really spending a lot of extra time learning how to organize my brain. And as an artist, that can be really difficult for us because, yeah, you hear music, you get overwhelmed with feelings. There's all these little fun sort of walking the line between crazy and creative things that happen to us as artists. And I think that really taking the time to know how your own mind works and organize it will make you the most productive and the most optimized. You know, I know now how I work best, what mediums I learn best in, how I communicate best, how my physical setup even works best for the way that I move. And, you know, once I do all those things, it's a lot easier to just get up and go and work on several things in one day.
Understandable, for sure. Let's talk now for a moment about She Knows Tech, if that's cool with you.
Sure.
Tell me all about it. How did you first get involved? What's the story?
Well, She Knows Tech has become an absolute juggernaut over the last couple of years. I first discovered it when I was initially coming to Berklee College of Music in Valencia, which is where the initiative started out. It's since evolved into a totally separate company, but at the time I met Jasmine Koch, the founder, and became quite close with her. We both have a very similar mission of believing that there are not enough women represented in the industry. And so it's become really important for both of us to spotlight women and non-male identifying individuals who really deserve it and maybe get looked over a lot of the time. So I've always been very honored to work with Jasmine on multiple projects, whether it's master classes, panels, or simply just mentoring sessions. And I'm really excited to see going forward their upcoming summit next year. The first one was a great success. And yeah, it's been one of the most just energetic and positive initiatives I've seen coming forward for women and non-male identifying people in the music industry.
Have you seen during the course of your career any change in the accessibility or the inclusion for non-male identifying people in the industry?
Absolutely. I mean, especially profoundly in the last couple of years, I really think that so many things have come to light and so many people are stepping out and telling their stories for the first time and sharing. And so more than ever, there are collectives springing up like She Knows Tech, She Said So, Female Pressure, Beats by Girls. There's just so many organizations of really powerful, smart women and non-male identifying people just everywhere. So I think that now the support is incredible and companies are starting to take initiative and open up, be more diverse. So right now I think is one of the most amazing times for young women and non-male persons to just open up and go for it, because those obstacles and those walls and those naysayers are basically almost gone. I mean, they're always going to live on in the YouTube comments, but we all know, don't read the YouTube comments.
I never do. Sometimes I reply to them with my eyes shut.
That's probably more than they deserve.
I wonder how much you think, if at all, gender plays into your expression in music, into the way that you make music. Does it feel like a part of your plan?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird question now because we're deconstructing what gender really is. But I think essentially one of the things I've noticed running a big community is, yeah, there are still predominantly male, and the female identifying are trans, meaning they were raised male. So I do think that, still being raised as a woman with traditional gender values makes women a little bit more shy to create, a little more second guessing, a little more likely to be victims of imposter syndrome. And I've definitely gone through all those things, but really I think it's informed my musical expression by just flipping it and going, okay, you know what? If I feel insecure, I'm going to read more. I'm going to learn more. I'm going to collaborate more. I'm going to do more. So it's kind of given me a little bit of spice, a little bit of fuel to just bust to just go really hard and explore new things. And I think that maybe I wouldn't necessarily be such an avid sound designer if I hadn't felt the initial impulse to just have to know 10 times as much as anyone. So I think that more than a style, it's a drive and it's a motivation, and that's kind of how it's informed my output.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree. I feel like so much of creative expression is exploring and understanding your own individual identity and how you relate to the world. And it's obviously not only about gender, it can be about where you were born or what you've been doing your life so far, But I think an exploration of yourself is kind of inherent in the artistic experience. Is it possible to make music without trying to relate to yourself in some way?
It is. It's a very different process, As I started doing more music for film licensing, things like that, I had to start doing that. I had to step away from myself and go, not everything is about being a sad little emo bass girl and lost in the digital universe. Sometimes you have to create different moods, and it's really fun. Actually, it's a little bit more gamified for me. Is putting myself inside another perspective, painting another picture inside my head, creating scenery that is not based on the feelings in my head or what's around me. And, it's quite fun. But there's something to be said about crying alone on a keyboard. There's no substitute.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you also, just before we wrap it up, what you think the future, either for you or for sound designers in general, will be. Where are we going? What's the next big thing in sound design or in music making for us all?
Wow. Well, I mean, there's what I think and then what I can hope for, but I have noticed all this AI stuff starting to happen, which is, a little scary as a sound designer. You get that feeling of, oh, this computer is going to just create something better than me, because, there's all these programs now that I've heard of where they're training people. They can watch you produce for a little while and then supposedly churn out a track that is reasonably comparable to something that you would do. So I guess that's the whole sci-fi futuristic what I fear. But what I hope for is just intuitive, what I used to call RCA to brain translation. Just technology getting even better at interpreting what is in our heads and being a little bit less limited to standard controls. Maybe having more standardized MIDI that is motion capture based, the way that people are moving towards with gesture MIDI or hacking Kinect cameras. I truly feel that physical movement and emotions are tied into artistic expression, and therefore they're an important part of sound design for me, because I'm creating sounds to generate emotional responses. So what I really hope for is an AI, a software, or some kind of controller, or the whole package that just continues to help it be more intuitive to pick up what I'm feeling on the inside or what I'm being inspired by.
That sounds really cool. Have you tried many of these kind of early attempts in that area, the kind of voice to MIDI microphones and that kind of thing?
I've been trying little bits, and so far they're definitely moving along. I've got some Bluetooth MIDI gesture stuff, and I'm always hacking together bits of different controllers and breaking things. So I'll tell you, it's still breaking, but it's getting there. And yeah, always super excited to try anything new.
Yeah, I find it always very difficult to adopt new technologies. I know that some people are incredibly excited by that. Do you fall on one side or the other?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm still also love traditional cultures, world music, and influences as well. I mean, it's not mutually exclusive. And in fact, one of the most exciting things for me is when I can cross-pollinate those worlds, when I can take cutting-edge new technology and interface it with traditional things to capture those things or to maybe translate those things in a new way. And just want to give a shout out to one of my favorite projects of all time, Tribal Gathering, where I am honored enough to build a studio on the premises of a festival that hosts over 60 indigenous tribes from around the world, telling their stories, teaching workshops, and interacting inside the framework of a pretty banging electronic music festival. So traditional and cutting edge, both are things that I love and I love to combine. That's the best collaboration of all, in my opinion.
What a wonderful place to finish. Thanks very much for coming along and having a word with me. I know we're all kind of busy right now.
Great to be here, and it's been a lot of fun discovering all the crazy Kilohearts plugins and the wormhole that they bring you down, so thanks for that.
Hey, it's absolutely our pleasure.
Thank you.